All right, we're back with Leonor, and she's going to show us actually what she does and how she does it. So let's get going on that. So first of all, I want to ask you, I was kind of surprised when I first saw this because I thought, don't painters work with those palette things that you see? But you've got them here on your glass tabletop.
Oh my gosh, there's no other palette for me than glass because, especially with acrylics, because they're flexible. They're like kind of pigment suspended in plastic. It's a very flexible paint. When it dries, all I have to do is just scrape it off like that. I mean, it's great. And then I have a brand new palette. I don't know what other people normally use, but the glass works for me. It's easy to clean, easy to mix colors on, and I don't have to waste paper. I know that with oil paints, I think it's a little different story because they dry so hard. Mm-hmm. But this works for me.
So what different kinds of paints are there? See, once again, I don't know these things. So there's oil. You mentioned oil and acrylic.
I guess those are the most widely used. I guess you can consider spray paint, a type of paint. I mean, it's, being used widely. But I use acrylic just because it gives me the blending that I need, but it also dries a lot quicker than oil paints. I don't feel that oil paints would be right for the surface I'm painting on because I'm painting on a very porous surface that does, I think, it moves. It's not, it's very porous and it moves and it stretches with, I'm sure, changes in the environment, humidity, dryness.
Oh, I would have never thought of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just the feel of it works for me. Right now it can be used like watercolor, or I tend to use it a lot like I would oil paint. It's just, for some reason I feel like if I use oil paint, I'm never going to finish a piece. I'm just going to keep working in it and never stop. This forces me to finish because it does dry, even though I have a way of keeping it wet. What I use is called a slow drying blending medium.
Oh, let's hold that up. So
just add it to the paint, and that just
and it doesn't dilute it. Let's hold that up to the camera too, so people can see what you just picked up. There you go.
I call it it retards the drying time. Basically, it's just kind of a clear suspension formula, and just mix it in. I usually use a spray bottle for wetting the colors again.
Okay.
But basically it extends the life of the paint so that it doesn't dry too quickly, and I can see that it's already started to dry. But that's okay.
Is it too dry?
It's getting there. I think we got enough.
Okay.
But yeah, I just...
I love that color blue. That's so pretty.
Yeah, I got quite a few blues there. With what I have, I can make whatever color I need. I rarely ever use black straight out of the tube. If I need to get really, really dark, really like almost a black color, I can get pretty dark with the colors I have here and then add a tiny bit of black. But I pretty much try to make my own dark from the colors that I have here. Blue, ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, Prussian blue, and...
So those blues here you have, they have different names.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
They're so subtle. The differences in them are so subtle to me.
Yeah. Well, like this is cerulean blue would be like a sky blue. It's an absolute must for if you're painting the sky. You always use cerulean blue. The other blues, I just like them because maybe one has a little bit more of like a purple or indigo feel to it. The other one, like the cerulean blue, is a little bit lighter. It just really preference. I like to have more than what I need available. That way I don't have to stop what I'm
Stop
doing
down.
and mix.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And do you start like with the other colors? Do you start with primary colors and mix all your own, or do they come like in tubes?
Well, I mean, so I try to mix. I never use anything straight out of the tube. It's just a bad practice because it's not what I want.
Okay.
It's great if that's what you want, but I'm working with a lot of browns and earth tones, so I don't get earth tones from right out of the bottle. I mean, there's an earth tone color here, but I try to actually make this color with the colors I have and then just augment with the brown that's out of the tube.
Okay.
Just kind of to check myself. But it's really fun to get, just the whole mixing of it is just very satisfying. It's a little like cooking, I guess.
I was just thinking that. I thought like making a recipe.
Yeah.
Huh?
But I don't normally start with paint. What I usually start first is with... How I start is I really just kind of chalk in the outline of the design I'm doing. Obviously, this one's an elephant. I've outlined some of the major areas that I want to work with, like the eyes. I have 3 flowers up here that I know that I want to paint. I'm going to actually use acrylic paint. I know that I want acrylic paint for the tusks on each side and for the eyes, because in all my pieces I really do want detail, and I want vibrance in those parts of the face. The butterfly too will be painted. And everything around that, I'm using chalk, or what's called Conte crayon. It's a combination of Conte crayon and
Can you hold
pastel.
a couple of those up so people
Sure.
can see them?
So this would be, I believe the color is called Sanguine.
Okay.
It's got kind of a really deep reddish, kind of iron earth look
It's pretty.
to it. Some of the other colors, and Conte doesn't have a lot of, well, actually I shouldn't say that. I don't normally use the whole spectrum when it comes to the Conte crayons, just because I really want the brown tones. I accent with some of the other colors, but it's the earth tones that I'm really looking for. The tones range from like kind of like a light sand color to all the way to dark brown and black. So I can get pretty dark. But that's my base. My base is, so I start with, let's say, a mid-tone, like above the eye. Just kind of fill in the space, and then the key part is really rubbing it in to the surface.
Okay. Into the porous surface. It'll go into the like the pores.
Yeah, it feels like wood. It's very much behaves like sanded wood. And I will maybe go over to the lighter area. Let's see, I've got where's my light color?
The more I look at it, it's more like that eye is really looking at me already, and you don't even have it finished. But it's just like, I feel like this elephant's looking at me. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. The eyes are gonna be quite. They're gonna stand out quite a bit. But what I want to do is to kind of really patch in as much of what I call sort of the background of the piece, even though it's not really the background, but the shapes around the areas where I'm actually going to paint. I want to sort of get those set, because once I've started to paint, I can't change that. So I'm really filling in the chalk areas that I know are going to be chalked.
And why can't you change it?
So once I lay down the gesso, which is the primer for where I'm going to paint, that's fixed. I mean, I can't really go over gesso with chalk because it's a different... this gesso medium is meant for paint. It's meant to hold paint on top of it.
And what is gesso?
And gesso is basically, it's a primer.
Can you show
It's
a
base.
little of
Yeah,
that?
it looks just like white paint. So it's a primer that's suspended. It's a primer that's tinted white, and you can actually get a clear gesso. In this case, it's just, yeah, it looks just like white paint, but it's like a glue. It's like a glue.
It kind of has that consistency too, doesn't it?
And it just basically it's a primer so that it's like if you're painting, you know, if I was painting on a canvas, I primer it, and in some cases I'd want it white, so I would gesso it white so that the pigments stand out. So I'm working from light to dark.
Oh, okay.
I don't need gesso on anything here because I'm chalking, and as I'm chalking, I'm also, normally what I would do is I get it to where the chalk is as saturated as possible. I'll take this outside and then I'll spray fix it. So I spray fix in between layers. I work in layers.
I was
with
wondering
the
if
chalk.
you did anything like that. Yeah. So then it's set when you spray it.
It's set, but then I go over it again. I go over it again. I go over it again. So a lot of times people will say that, well, ask me if I paint with oils because it starts to look very blended, and it almost does look like paint, but it really is not. I'm really working it with my fingers, and I'm layering it and spray fixing it and layering it and going back. And I think that once I've got the chalk areas mapped out as much as possible, that's when I can go in and define what areas I'm actually going to do the painting on, like the tusks, the eyes, part of the top where the flowers will be. And those I know, once I have the chalk area defined, then that informs me which area I can set permanently as the areas to paint.
I see.
Yeah.
And you use your fingers for painting also, not just brushes?
No.
Only brushes.
Only brushes for the painted areas. Chalk is the only material that I use to rub into the wood surface.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it really is a process. It's like step 1, step 2, step 3
Kind of.
of how you go about it.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. Similar with every piece in that I start with a chalk outline, try to define in my head and on the piece what areas do I want painted, and what areas am I going to remain chalk or going to remain as chalk. So then, like for instance, this is my paintbrush with gesso. So I say, okay, well this is the tusk right here, so I'm going to lay in the primer in this area here, and I'm going to give it a couple of layers, give it a couple of coats so that it looks like this side.
Okay.
And then when it's dry, I mean, you should wait 24 hours, but actually I would start painting it now because it's actually pretty dry. But it's just, these areas are just, it's like painting on anything, like canvas, whatever. It's just like painting on anything else I would want to paint on. So then when I get to that stage where I'm ready to paint, you know, I'm going to what I've set up as my colors. So I have a few colors here that I've mixed where I'm going to add where the tusk is.
Right.
And
the subtleties between these colors is, like, to me, like, are these two different colors right here?
well, they're in the same family. They're in the sort of brown family, tan family. The difference is each of them has a different amount of white added to it, so they're tinted. Like this one right here maybe has a little bit more yellow. This one, darker one, has a little bit more blue, a little bit more. Yeah.
Oh.
To get a darker brown. I try not to use it out of the bottle, but
Right.
you can get your brown. Brown is kind of a mixture of a lot of different colors. It might sound like it's muddy, but in a way, that's exactly what it is. Plus, I supplement with a already pre-mixed brown so that I get the right warmth warm tone to it. But yeah, basically that's my brown right there. And if I need to add a little bit of black, I can do that. But I'll start with sort of a mid-tone color.
See, it takes an artist to see the differences in these colors, because those, well, at least these two look very similar to me. But
well, you're right, and they're the same. They're the same family of color. But that being said, the tint is different, and the shade is different. This is more of a darker version of this, and this over here is an even lighter version of both of them.
Okay.
So yeah, this is basically, I just work my way painting on the gesso, and so what was white now becomes actual color. And
it's fascinating.
I'm not doing too much color variation here, obviously, because a tusk is white, but it'll be mostly look like a white, but it's not pure white.
Right.
It's a variation
ivory?
of white. There you go. Yes, ivory.
And I'm noticing, coming down this way, there is that brush. Is that the palm frond, or is that brush strokes that are like lines, kind of?
Oh, the striations you're seeing?
Yes.
Okay, so part of that is the texture of the palm frond showing through. Even the gesso can't really cover that completely. Yeah, those are just the natural striations of the palm. Now, if I was working, it's just no different than canvas. When you're working on a canvas, you see the texture of the canvas. I
never thought about that, but I guess you do,
yeah,
right?
Canvas had, the only thing you're not going to really, if you're working on, if you gesso like a masonite board, which is a smooth board, and put gesso over that, you're going to have a really smooth surface. This is not a very smooth surface. It's got some, I guess, it's sort of figured. It's textured. Yeah.
That's interesting, because it gives an added element, the palm frond texture.
I think that's what I like, and that's why I kind of gravitate toward the base of it being kind of that brown earthy color, because I know that it's wood, and I want to keep the feel of the wood and the texture to show. I want that to show
the purity through. Kind of.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, the purity of what the material is, and then everything around that. I really have fun with the paints. Those are the parts that really jump out.
And you were saying you wanted to add more color to these pieces. Would that color be in the things around the animal, like in the flower and the butterfly, or would that be the animal itself, its eyes or something like that?
I think like on this piece, if like you look at the line that I did, the only real pop of color for me is in the eyes. I think in this piece I want to add the flowers on top. I want to add, of course, color to the eye, but I think that in the trunk I wanted to sort of add a little bit more green. I just wanted to give it a hint of another color okay, maybe it normally wouldn't be there, but why not? Why not put it in there? Maybe I think that the reference photograph that I had a little bit of green that might have come from the photograph the image being adjusted in a way that it brought out green in it, and I kind of liked it. I kind of liked the way that looked.
Oh, okay.
And as a different color, I think I might want to do that. I might want to add another color that's not like a brown tone or an earth tone, maybe a green.
Right. It seems like there would be a fine line between the creativity yet keeping the authenticity of the animal that you're creating. Like if you would go too far out on colors, it would lose its authenticity, I guess is the best word I'm looking for. It would become more of I don't want to say comical, but unrealistic maybe piece.
Well, I mean, the way I paint is far from being photorealistic. I think I'm painting it in a way that's enough that you can tell what it is. But I would be careful to say that, let's say I painted this pink, you've seen a pink elephant. I mean, you still know it's an elephant, right?
Yeah.
I think where the
We'd have to count them.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, if you're seeing pink elephants, there's some fun going on there.
Right.
Purple. In fact, I one of my canvas paintings, I painted an elephant purple.
Oh, you did?
So I should probably show that to you.
Uh-huh.
It definitely looks like an elephant, but I painted it in purple tones.
Yeah, we'd all love to see that.
Yeah, I'll definitely show it to you.
Okay.
But I think where the authenticity part comes in is what the artist is trying to say, because you can paint this purple.
Oh.
And you still know it's an elephant. It's really, I guess there's no right way to paint anything or to depict anything.
So there are no
rules here.
There's no rules, no restrictions, right.
Just the ones we put on ourselves, really. I mean, there's a million different ways to paint this, really. I just have developed a certain style. It's different than, let's say, this piece, which is one of my first pieces that I started with, which is completely abstract. And, it was great when I was doing it, but my style has evolved over time.
And then there's this part of the frond too. You incorporate that into.
Yeah, they're really kind of like the loose fibers of the piece of the frond, and sometimes they fall off, and it's not. It doesn't make or break the piece.
Okay.
But it can add something that people like. Seeing if it sometimes adds to the piece. It adds to the character of the piece.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make it any more fragile because it's usually not. It's an accent of the piece, and that part can get painted too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't think about that. Right. So the process is you do the chalk, you do the, what's it called, the primer?
The gesso primer.
Yes.
And by the way, there are times when I've actually used a clear gesso. There is such a thing called a clear gesso, where it's a primer that keeps the base of the material intact. In other words, it's not white, it's just like clear. It's a gesso that works just like the white gesso, but it keeps the clarity of what's underneath it intact, and I can paint on that too.
Okay.
But usually I use the white because I want the vibrance, I want the color, the pigment that gets painted on to sort of be bright and prominent.
I see. So after you do the painting, so you put the gesso on the entire piece before you put the paint on?
No, the gesso is only in the areas where I want actual water acrylic paint to go.
Okay.
Yeah, and right now it's wherever you can see the white.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm going to be painting.
Okay.
Gessoing first, and then letting it dry, and then painting.
So on some of them you just leave chalk. You don't put the paints.
Oh, correct. Yeah, the majority of
That's what I'm starting to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the majority of the piece is chalk, and it's just it. In the end, it tends to look a little like paint because it's smooth. It's worked into the surface, and it's blended. It's very blended, so it tends to look. And I try to create it so that the paint parts are not so stark from the chalk parts, so that they sort of meld together in a way that makes sense.
Right.
And there's areas where I become very close to each other, so I try to make it work to where it doesn't look like a completely different.
I never even thought from looking at your pieces that
they're two separate.
Exactly.
Medium. Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought that looking at the pieces. Yeah. So then you spray it. You said with the finishing.
So the chalk area. So that's why Well, the reason why I work as much of the chalk as I can before I gesso and paint is because I'm going to be layering, I'm going to be spray fixing the chalk down, and it's not really a good idea for me to paint and then have to spray the chalk and then paint and then spray the chalk, because then what it does is it makes the painted areas hard to work with, because essentially what I'm doing is I'm spray fixing the whole thing, and I don't want those painted areas to be spray fixed. I want those to be unprotected. So hopefully that that makes sense.
It does make sense. Yeah. So I think the process is fascinating. How do you know when you finished a piece?
When I start really slowing down. when I'm looking at it and staring at it for like 10 minutes, then I know it's time to put down the paintbrush and put everything else. I think that, of course, once I've got the chalk down, the chalk is already pretty much set. If I've got, I might do some fine details at the very end, but I pretty much know that I look around at the piece and it feels finished to me, whether I'm happy with it or not. I think about signing my name at the bottom or somewhere, then I know it's pretty much finished.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't need to touch it anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, just so there just comes a natural stopping point.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else I haven't asked you that's specific to your paintings and what you do?
Well, I mean, some people might ask, well, how do these things hang?
That's a good thought.
The final, so once the paint is dried and I've got enough of the chalk is pretty much not going anywhere, then I varnish it. It's going to be a spray varnish or a brush-on varnish. Let that dry, and then...
and what does the varnish do? What does it accomplish?
Well, when you look at the pieces, you see like a sheen. What that does is it protects it, because it's not like a flat painting that's going underneath glass. So essentially the varnish acts as a barrier from moisture, dust, from anything external, because that's the only protective layer.
Because if someone even went to dust it off to clean it, kind of, you don't want them wiping the chalk or the paint.
Oh yeah, that won't happen. Yeah, if I didn't varnish these, if it was a flat piece of artwork, then I could leave it as is. But they're not, and
it's not like you can put glass over them or something either, right?
I suppose I could. I don't know that would.
No.
It wouldn't make sense.
No.
It wouldn't make sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I guess the final piece is the attachment on the back, and that's
Let's hold this up over here for the camera.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So what do you attach this with here?
So this is actually JB Weld.
What is that?
JB Weld is something that you get at a hardware store, and it's basically, I think, used by mechanics. It's two different substrates that you mix together. One's white, one's dark, and essentially it's like you create a liquid metal. It's like a liquid metal that's hardened.
It's very hard, isn't it?
It's not going anywhere. But there's two wires. I bend two loops, and then
with hooks in there.
I create the hooks. I take a piece of wire, cut them, and then just sort of glue them in place. They have to sort of dry overnight.
Oh, I see. So the wire's coming down here and looping and going down here.
Yeah, that's essentially my...
So you don't have to put any kind of hole through it that way.
Right. I want to avoid doing that. Right.
You don't want to do that.
No.
Yeah.
But then my picture wire is here. I mean, once it's hardened, then it's ready to hang.
Okay. Let's turn that one around and show it. And this one is...
This one is called, I think I called this Mount Olive.
Okay, let's hold it up a little bit. Can we hold it a little bit more this direction?
Yeah.
That is gorgeous.
Thank you.
Isn't it pretty? It's beautiful. Okay. All right. Well, Thank you so much. This has just been a joy. Let's spin you around. And thank you so much. It's been a joy to spend time with you today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful seeing you again.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And spending some time.
I hope we all learned something.
I learned a lot. You're a good teacher, too.
I don't know about that.
All right. So thank you again. And
My pleasure.
We will talk soon.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you for watching and or listening to Creativity Inside and Out. I do recommend watching my show if you can, because it's really tailored toward being a visual show. It's available on YouTube. Just search for Creativity Inside and Out and look for the light bulb logo. If you do listen to the show, go to https://creativity-inside-and.captivate.fm/listen. There you will find a variety of places where you can listen, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Enjoy watching and or listening. And please, if you would, follow the show and subscribe. That really means a lot to me. Thank you.